She swept the floors of a company that had no idea she was sleeping in its lobby. Every single night, after the last security guard finished his rounds and the building went quiet, Toraya would pull a thin wrapper from under the reception desk and spread it on the cold marble floor. Then she would curl up next to her little daughter, wrap her arms around her, and whisper the same words she had been whispering for months. "Tomorrow will be better, Yo-Yo. Tomorrow will be better." But tomorrow kept coming, and it kept looking exactly the same. This is not a story about a rich man who saved a poor woman. This is a story about a woman who was already strong, already brilliant, already deserving of every good thing in this life. But the world had stripped her down to nothing. And what happened next, inside the shiny glass building on Abba Road in Port Harcourt, would change both their lives in ways that nobody could have predicted. Not even Toria herself. Her name was Toria Amaichi, 34 years old, slender, dark-skinned, with eyes that carried a kind of sadness that made strangers look twice. She had grown up in Diobu, Port Harcourt, in a family that did not have much, but always had enough. Her mother had been a petty trader who sold provisions from a small shop near the Diobu market, open every morning by 6, closed only when the goods ran out. Her father had driven a company bus for an oil contractor until a bad knee forced him into early retirement. They were not poor people. They were ordinary people, which in Port Harcourt meant something specific. A life of careful budgeting and long-term hoping, of children studying under kerosene lamplight when NEPA took the power, of church attendance every Sunday, because faith was not just spiritual, it was structural. It held the weak together. Toraya had been the kind of student who made her parents proud in the quiet, steady way. Not the kind who won trophies and got her name in newspapers, but the kind who never gave her teachers a moment's worry, who read ahead of the class and asked the questions that made her lecturers pause. She had studied hard, gotten into the University of Port Harcourt, and graduated with a degree in sociology. She had been proud of that degree. She had framed it and hung it on the wall of the small apartment she shared with her husband daily. Daily Amechi. When people asked her to describe him, she would smile that quiet smile of hers and say, he was the kind of man who remembered exactly how you took your tea. And that was true. Daly was warm, patient, funny in that gentle way that sneaks up on you. He was not a rich man, but he worked hard as a logistics coordinator for a small shipping company near Trans-Amadi Industrial Layout. They had a simple life. They had Yo-Yo. They had each other. And then he got sick. It started as back pain, sweetie. The kind that men in their late 30s dismiss because there is always something to lift.
It's going to be all right,
always
sweetie.
A reason to push through.
Come here.
Then came the frequent toilet visits in the middle of the night. 3 times. 4 times. Daily shuffling back to bed and saying he was fine. It was probably nothing. Then the blood one morning that was not nothing. Then the doctor's appointment that changed everything. Prostate cancer, they said. Stage 3. The kind that does not announce itself nicely. The kind that has been growing quietly in the background while life goes on around it. And by the time you find it, it has already made itself at home. The kind that eats your savings before it eats your body. Toraya remembered the drive home from the hospital that day. Neither of them spoke for the first 20 minutes.
I can't believe this is happening.
They were stuck in the traffic near Rumuola roundabout, the way you are always stuck near Rumuola. And she sat with her hands in her lap, and the doctor's printout folded in her bag. And she looked out the window at the street traders weaving between the cars with sachets of cold water and phone chargers. And she thought about the framed degree on the wall at home and the plans they had been making, and the way Yo-Yo had asked just that morning if they could get a dog. Daly had turned to her at a red light and taken her hand and said, "We will handle it. Together. "We always handle things." And he had said it in such a matter-of-fact voice, like he was talking about a broken generator or a delayed salary, that she had almost believed him. For 2 years, Toria watched her husband fight. She held his hand through every hospital visit at the University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital, every injection, every round of medication that cost more than their combined monthly income. She held him through every night he cried quietly because he did not want Yo-Yo to hear him. She sold her jewelry. She sold the small electronics they had saved for. She borrowed from her mother, who did not have much to give but gave it anyway. She borrowed from her church, which gave her a loan, and prayed over her kitchen and brought food on Sundays. She borrowed from people she barely knew because there was no pride left to protect, only a man to keep alive. Daly fought as hard as he could. There were good months and terrible months. There were months when he went back to work part-time and came home looking almost like himself. And Toria would let herself believe, quietly, in the corner of her heart where she kept her most private hopes, that maybe the trajectory was changing. And then a bad month would come and crash all of that down. But in the end, the cancer won. He died on a Tuesday morning in March at the University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital, in a room that smelled of antiseptic and the specific sadness of places where people do the most important things of their lives. Toria held his hand until the end. Yo-Yo had fallen asleep in the plastic chair beside the bed 2 hours before, exhausted by the long night of waiting. Her small body curved into itself in the way children sleep when they have been up too long. He was 39 years old. Toria sat in that room for a long time after it was over, her hand still holding his, which was now still. Outside the window, Port Harcourt was waking up. The sound of morning traffic was beginning to build on the road below. Somewhere in the hospital, a baby was crying. The world was starting a new day, like it had no idea what had just happened in this room on the 3rd floor. After a while, she gently woke Yo-Yo and told her that Daddy had gone to rest. Yo-Yo looked at her with those big, clear eyes, and then looked at her father, and then back at her mother. She did not cry immediately. She climbed onto the bed and lay down beside her father for a few minutes, her small hand on his chest. Then she sat up and said she was hungry. Toria had taken her daughter downstairs to the hospital canteen and bought her a meat pie.
Okay.
She had watched Yo-Yo eat it with the careful, focused attention of a child managing a complicated feeling. And then she had started making the calls that needed to be made, because there was no one else to make them. After the funeral, the landlord came. They were 4 months behind on rent. 2 weeks later, Toria and Yo-Yo were standing on the street in Rumuola with 2 bags of clothes and nowhere to go. Her mother was in a 1-room in Diobu with no space. Her friends had their own struggles. The medical bills from Daly's treatment had drained everything down to 0. For 3 weeks, they stayed in a church hall. Then the church needed the hall back. And that is how Toria Amechi, a university graduate, a widow, a mother, ended up taking a cleaning job at Goldfield Partners Limited, one of the most respected consulting firms on Abba Road, Port Harcourt. It paid 22,000 naira a month. It was not enough for rent anywhere decent, but it was something. And the firm had a lobby, a big, cool, quiet lobby with marble floors and leather seats. And sometimes, when the security was slow, a determined woman could find her way to a corner of it after hours. That is where Toria and Yo-Yo slept for 2.5 months. Yo-Yo was 6 years old. She had her father's eyes and her mother's stubbornness. She never complained. Not once. Not about the cold of the marble floor. Not about the nights when the lobby got too quiet and scary. Not about eating rice and beans from a plastic bag, because there was no table, no kitchen, no home. She ate whatever Toria bought from the woman who sold rice and beans from a cart near the entrance of the building. She did her homework on the floor, using the torch on Toria's phone. She had learned very early, with the instinctive wisdom of children who grow up in hard circumstances, that life was serious business, and the right response to it was to get on with things. Toria kept the lobby spotless. The floors shone like they had never shone before that cleaner arrived. The reception desk gleamed. The glass doors were always streak-free, and if you looked carefully at the entry mat first thing each morning, it had been beaten clean and replaced with a precision that the building manager had once mentioned admiringly to nobody in particular. She was the first one in every morning, arriving before the security handover at 6, and the last one working every evening, long after the office cleaner's contracted hours ended. She worked with her head down and her heart sealed, because if she let herself feel the full weight of what was happening, what she had lost, and where she was sleeping, and what her life had become, she would fall apart completely. And falling apart was not something she could afford right now. She had a daughter to feed. She had a daughter to keep warm. She had a daughter who was going to have a different life than this. If Toria Amechi had to burn every last thing in herself as fuel to make it happen. Goldfield Partners Limited was the kind of company that made people in Port Harcourt straighten their ties when they walked past it. It occupied 3 floors of a modern building on Abba Road, all glass and clean lines, and the faint smell of expensive air freshener, the particular scent of institutions that charged a lot for their services and wanted you to feel that the moment you entered. The building had a generator that never failed during power cuts, which in Port Harcourt was not a small thing. It had a proper parking lot and a reception area with real leather chairs and potted plants that were attended to by a woman who came specifically for the plants on Tuesdays and Fridays. The company did corporate consulting, project management, and business advisory for oil and gas companies, government contractors, and private firms across River State and beyond. It had a reputation for delivering what it promised, which was rare enough in the Port Harcourt business environment to be a genuine competitive advantage. At the head of it all was Nelson Okafor. Nelson was 41, tall, with a calm, measured energy about him that people described as gravitas when they were being impressed and unhurried when they were being casual. He had the kind of face that people trusted immediately. Strong jaw, steady eyes, a voice that never rose above the volume it needed to be. He had built Goldfield from a 2-man operation in a rented office off Peter O'Deely Road to a 40-person firm with clients across 5 states. The path from there to here had not been straight or smooth. He had lost contracts that should have been his. He had been undercut by bigger firms. He had gone through 1 year where he almost closed the company and went to work for someone else, and had decided against it in the end, partly out of pride, and partly because he had looked at the market clearly and decided that his instinct about the gap he was filling was correct. He had been right about the gap. He drove a dark blue Toyota Land Cruiser, wore well-cut suits that had been made by a tailor in GRA Phase 2 who understood how to dress serious men, and had a habit that his staff all noticed and appreciated of greeting every single person in the building by name, from the director level down to the woman who watered the plants on Tuesdays, including Toria. Every morning, if their paths crossed in the corridor or near the lifts, Nelson Okafor would nod at her and say, "Good morning, Toria." Just like that. Simple. Clear. Like she was a person and not a ghost, which after months of being invisible was something that registered more than it should have needed to. His partner was a different matter entirely. Gozi Peterside was the kind of man who had been born with a sense of superiority and had spent 40 years carefully feeding and maintaining it like a prized possession. He was the commercial director and co-founder of Goldfield, a stocky man with a booming voice and an expensive watch collection that he adjusted frequently and unnecessarily during meetings so that people would be reminded it was there. He was not stupid. He was actually quite brilliant in a narrow, technical way, with a real gift for commercial deal structuring and the kind of aggressive negotiation that won contracts. But he had this thing about him, this deep, automatic habit of looking through people like they were furniture, like the world was divided into people who mattered and people who served, and the dividing line was drawn with great certainty and very little compassion. One afternoon, around 3 o'clock, Gozi was walking through the lobby when Toria was mopping the floor near the entrance. The afternoon light was coming through the glass doors at an angle that made the wet floor very visible if you were paying attention. The wet floor sign, bright yellow, was positioned exactly where the guidelines said to position it. Toria had followed the instructions precisely. She always did. Gozi came out of the lift, talking loudly on his phone about a contract figure, his heels clicking on the marble. He moved through the lobby without looking down, the way powerful people move through spaces they have decided require nothing of them, and stepped directly on the wet floor she had just mopped. His shoe slid half an inch. He grabbed the reception counter to catch himself, more startled than endangered. He looked down at his shoe, which was now damp. He looked at the wet floor sign. He looked up at Toria. He said, loudly enough for the receptionist Rose and 2 people waiting in the leather chairs to hear clearly, "Do your job properly." What exactly is the point of putting up a wet floor sign if the floor is still wet? The sign was right there, 2 feet from where he had stepped, at perfect eye level. The floor was wet in the area clearly demarcated by the sign and the yellow boundary markers. He had walked outside that boundary. But there was nobody in the lobby who was going to say that. Toria said nothing. She tightened her grip on the mop handle and looked at the floor. Rose pressed her lips together until they were pale. The 2 people waiting in the chairs looked in opposite directions, with the specific discomfort of witnesses to something small and ugly. There was nothing to say. Gozi was Gozi. Everyone in Goldfield knew it. You swallowed it and moved on. But what nobody in that lobby saw was Toria going into the supply closet behind the stairs 5 minutes later, sitting down on an upturned bucket and pressing the heels of her hands over her eyes so hard that little white bursts of light appeared at the edges of her vision. She was not going to cry. She was not going to punch anything. She was just going to sit here for 3 minutes and let the feeling move through her and out the other side. She sat. She breathed. She counted. 3 minutes exactly. Then she stood up, straightened her uniform, and went back to finish the floor. She could not afford to fall apart. Not here. Not today. Not when this building was the roof over her daughter's head. There is a kind of quiet dignity in a person who has been reduced to almost nothing, but still carries themselves with their back straight. Toria had that dignity. It radiated off her in a way that people noticed, even when they were not trying to. Nelson had noticed it. He had watched her work for weeks, arriving early, staying late, always thorough, always professional. He had asked Rose about her once, casually. Rose had said she was a hard worker, kept to herself, seemed like she had been through something heavy. Nelson had filed that away in the back of his mind and left it there. Until the night that changed everything. It was a Wednesday night, nearly 10:30. Nelson had been in the building late finishing a proposal for a new client, a major government contractor based in Abuja who wanted Goldfield to manage a multi-million naira infrastructure advisory contract. He had sent the last attachment at 10:10, leaned back in his chair, and let out a long breath. The office was empty. Even his personal assistant had long gone home. He took the lift down to the lobby, his laptop bag over one shoulder, jacket in hand. The lobby was dark, except for the security lighting along the lower edge of the walls, that soft orange glow that made everything look slightly dreamlike. Nelson stepped out of the lift and turned toward the main entrance. He stopped. On the floor behind the reception desk, half hidden by the counter, were two sleeping figures, a woman and a small child. The woman was curled around the child in the way that only mothers curl around their children, like her body was a shield. Their faces were peaceful. A thin cotton wrapper covered them both. Under the child's head was a folded piece of cloth that must have been serving as a pillow. Nelson stood very still for a long moment. Then he crouched down slowly. He looked at the woman's face and recognized her immediately. Toria, the cleaner. The one who was always first in and last out. The one who had the wet floor sign up before Gozi stepped on her freshly mopped floor. He did not wake her immediately. He stood up and walked slowly to the security desk, where the night guard, a tired young man named Emmanuel, was watching something on his phone. Nelson sat across from Emmanuel and asked him, quietly, how long this had been happening. Emmanuel looked like a man who had just swallowed something uncomfortable. He rubbed the back of his neck and admitted that it had been happening for about 2 months. He said he had not reported it because the woman always left early, before the morning staff arrived, always cleaned up so thoroughly that there was no trace. He said she had 2 bags she kept behind the supply closet. He said the little girl was very quiet. He said he had not had the heart to send them out, and he was sorry if he had done wrong. Nelson told him he had not done wrong. Then he walked back to the reception area, and he knelt beside Toria and touched her shoulder gently. She came awake like someone who slept with one ear always open, which she probably did. Her eyes snapped open and then widened when she saw Nelson Okafor kneeling beside her in his suit, with his laptop bag still over his shoulder. She sat up so fast she nearly knocked Yo-Yo sideways. Yo-Yo made a small sound and curled tighter. "Sir," Toria whispered, and there was a horror in her voice that was almost physical. "Sir, I am so sorry. Please, I will leave right now. I am so sorry." Nelson held up his hand, not aggressively, just steady. "Don't wake her," he said, nodding at Yo-Yo. "Sit down. Breathe." Toria sat, but she did not breathe. She looked like a woman bracing for the blow she had been waiting months for. "How long?" he asked. She looked at her hands. 2.5 months. He let that sit for a moment. Then he asked the question he already suspected the answer to. "What happened?" And something about the gentleness in his voice, something about the fact that he had not shouted, had not threatened, had not immediately reached for his phone to call security or worse, cracked something open in Toria Amaichi that had been sealed shut since the day Daly died. She told him everything. Daly's diagnosis, the 2 years of treatment, the mounting debt, the bills from the teaching hospital that she was still paying off in small amounts, the landlord who had shown no mercy, the church hall, the cleaning job she had taken, because at least it let her keep Yo-Yo close. At least the child could sleep in the lobby after hours. At least they had a roof over their heads, even if it was a marble lobby floor, and not a real home. She spoke quietly so as not to wake Yo-Yo. She did not cry, not until she mentioned Daly's name, and then she caught herself and pressed her lips tight and looked at the ceiling and breathed until it passed. Nelson listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer empty sympathy sounds. He just listened, with the full, serious attention of a person who understood that what he was hearing mattered. When she finished, the lobby was very quiet. A car passed on Abba Road outside. Yo-Yo shifted in her sleep. Nelson was quiet for a few seconds. Then he said, "You have a degree?" Toria blinked. That was not what she had expected him to say. "Yes, sociology, University of Port Harcourt." He nodded slowly. He looked at her in a way that was not pitying, not patronizing, just assessing, like he was reading something and finding it more interesting than expected. Then he stood up and said he would be back in a few minutes. He came back with a keycard. He had spoken to Emmanuel while Toria was waiting and had arranged for a company vehicle to be available. He told Toria he would be putting her and Yo-Yo up in a hotel for the next 2 weeks while he sorted out something more permanent. He said this was not charity, and she should not look at it that way. He said it was him doing what any decent person should do in this situation. He said she should not argue with him about it. She did not argue. The next morning, after Yo-Yo had eaten her first proper breakfast in months and was sitting on a hotel bed in Rumuola, watching cartoons on a proper television, Toria sat on the edge of the bed beside her and cried. Not the pressed lip, ceiling-staring kind. The real kind that shook her shoulders and made Yo-Yo look up from the television and pat her mother's arm and say, "Mommy, don't cry. Tomorrow will be better."
Come here, sweetie.
Toria laughed and through her tears.
I love you so much.
The child had been listening after all.
Come here,
2
sweetie.
weeks later, Nelson arranged for a furnished apartment in GRA Phase 2. It was a small 2-bedroom flat in a quiet compound off a side road that branched from Peter O'Deely. Clean, safe, with running water and a functional kitchen. He paid 3 months up front from his personal account and told Toria it was an advance that she would repay when she was able to, at whatever pace she could manage. He said this without making her feel small about it. That was the part she would remember long after everything else. One afternoon, during those first 2 weeks at the hotel, Nelson had stopped by to check how they were settling in, and the conversation had drifted from logistics to other things. He had asked about her degree, about what she had studied, what she had planned to do before life took the sharp turn it had taken. Toria had found herself talking about her thesis, about human capital development and community resource management, about a research project she had done in her final year on workforce reintegration of informal sector workers. She had talked with a quiet passion that surprised even herself, because she had locked that part of her brain away for so long, she had nearly forgotten it was there. Nelson had listened the way he always listened, with complete attention. Then he had told her, simply, to write up her CV and send it to his email address. She had argued with him about that one. She had said it was too much. He had already done too much. He had said it was not about doing her a favor. It was about not wasting a qualified person. He had said Goldfield had been looking to build out its human resources and organizational development practice for months and had not found the right fit. He had said she should send the CV and let the process handle itself. She sent it. He passed it to his HR manager. 3 days later, she was invited for a formal interview. The panel was chaired by the HR manager and 2 senior consultants. Nelson was not in the room. Whatever happened in that interview room, it happened on its own merits. She got the offer. Junior consultant, organizational development. Salary that was 5 times what the cleaning job paid. Benefits. A proper contract. The day she signed that contract, sitting in a small conference room on the 2nd floor of the Goldfield building on Abba Road, Toria held the pen over the signature line and paused for just a second. She thought about Daly. She thought about how he would have looked at her right now. She thought about Yo-Yo asking her every morning at breakfast what she was going to do at work today. She signed the contract. She was good at the job. Better than good. She was the kind of person who asks questions that make people rethink processes they have been following for years without examining. She brought energy and insight and a methodical approach to her work that the senior consultants noticed quickly. Within her first month, she had flagged 3 inefficiencies in the company's internal staff development program and proposed solutions that were so practical and well-researched that one of the senior consultants circulated her memo to the entire team. And through all of this, something else was happening too. Something quieter. Something neither of them had planned for or spoken about directly. But it was there, in the way Nelson would stop by her desk with a question that was not really a question, in the way Toria would look up when she heard his voice in the corridor, and then immediately look back at her screen. In the way they had started eating lunch at the same time, first because their schedules aligned, and then because they had begun quietly making sure their schedules aligned. The way he remembered that she did not take sugar in her tea. The way she remembered that he hated eating meetings before noon. The small, quiet, completely involuntary attentiveness of 2 people who are beginning to orbit each other. It was Rose, the receptionist, who said it out loud first. She said it to one of the other admin staff while they were eating lunch in the small kitchen on the ground floor, not knowing that Toria was around the corner making tea. Olga Nelson didn't find reason to walk past her office every day. Person way no see before. Toria had stood around that corner with her tea, biting the inside of her cheek to keep from smiling. Nelson asked her to dinner on a Friday afternoon in November. He came to her office, closed the door behind him, stood on the other side of her desk with his hands in his pockets, and said he had been thinking they should go somewhere properly, not the office cafeteria, not a working lunch, somewhere real. He named a restaurant on Peter O'Deely Road that was known for grilled fish and live music on Friday evenings. He said this with the calm confidence of a man who had chaired difficult board meetings, but Toria noticed that he was turning his car key over and over in his pocket. She said yes. That Friday evening on Peter O'Deely Road was the kind of evening that lives in the memory as a single continuous feeling rather than a sequence of events. The restaurant was warm and well lit, with the smell of grilled pepper soup and the quiet movement of ceiling fans overhead. They ate tilapia and fried plantain and talked for 3 hours without noticing the time.
Me too.
They talked about his childhood in Ogba, about her childhood in Diobu, about the company,
Me too.
about Yo-Yo, about the city, about everything. Nelson talked about his sister, his only sibling, a woman he was clearly very close to. He said her name once in passing, Ricky, and moved on to something else. Toria filed the name away without much thought. She told him about Daly. Not everything, not all the pain, but enough. She told him about who Daly had been before he got sick, the warm and steady and teasing man who made the best egg stew in Port Harcourt. She told him this easily, without the tight chest she usually got when Daly's name came up. And Nelson listened with the full, quiet attention that she was beginning to understand was just how he was with everything that mattered to him. On the drive back, he walked her to her door on the compound in GRA Phase 2. They stood in the small space between his car and the gate, and Nelson said the thing he had clearly been organizing in his head all evening. He said he knew the circumstances of how they had met were unusual. He said he knew she was still navigating a lot. He said he did not want to complicate her life, but he said he could not pretend that he had not been thinking about her in a way that went beyond professional concern for several months now. And he thought she deserved to know that directly, not through hints. Toria looked at him in the soft light from the compound for a long moment. She thought about telling him it was complicated. She thought about telling him she was not ready. Both of those things were somewhat true. But she was also a woman who had spent years watching a good man love her well, and she knew the texture of genuine feeling when she encountered it. And what she was seeing right now, in the careful, direct, slightly nervous way Nelson Okafor was standing in front of her car gate on a Friday night, was genuine feeling. She told him she had been thinking about him too. He smiled. It was the realest smile she had seen from him, the one without the composed, professional overlay. It was the smile of a man who had been holding his breath. They stood there for a few more minutes, talking about nothing important, just not wanting to end the evening. Then she went inside, and he drove back up Peter O'Dilly Road, and Toria stood in her small sitting room in the dark for a while before turning on the lights. The next several weeks were the happiest she had been since before Daly got sick. She understood that there was something complicated about the happiness. There was a layer of it that felt like disloyalty, as if being happy in this specific way, with this specific person, was a betrayal of something she owed to Daly's memory. She had sat with that feeling several evenings alone after Yo-Yo was asleep, trying to examine it honestly. And what she had found, when she was honest, was that Daly himself would have been the last person to require her to suffer. He had been, above all things, a person who wanted her well. That had been the core of him. She knew it as surely as she knew anything. She let herself be happy. They were careful at work, professional. There were no displays, no obvious signals, nothing that would give the office gossip network fresh material. But on evenings and weekends, they were building something together. Sunday, drives along the waterfront at Okrika, where the water turned
so
silver
peaceful
in
out
the late
here.
light.
Yeah, it's the perfect
Afternoons
I
taking
could walk
Yo-Yo
like
to the
this for
children's
hours.
park near GRA Phase 3. Long phone calls after Yo-Yo was asleep. The easy kind that begin with a purpose and then dissolve into conversation that has no agenda and no end time. Simple, quiet, real things. Yo-Yo had started calling Nelson Uncle Nelson with a comfortable familiarity that
champ.
happened so gradually
You
that
two are
Toria could not
adorable.
identify the exact moment it
High
began.
five, champ.
It was just one day he was Mr.
You two are
Nelson,
adorable.
and then one day he was Uncle Nelson. And that was that. Nelson had taken to bringing Yo-Yo small things when he visited. A coloring book one week, a puzzle another, once a small bag of Puff Puff from a woman he knew near Rumuola, who made it with just enough pepper and just enough sweetness to be exactly right. Yo-Yo received all of these gifts with the serious, evaluating manner of a child who knows how to weigh sincerity and will not be bought cheaply. She approved of Nelson. She had made this clear by including him in her hand-clapping games without being asked, which was, Toria understood, a very high honor. One Saturday, after they had spent the afternoon at the park, and Nelson was sitting on the small couch in Toria's sitting room, while Yo-Yo tried to teach him a hand-clapping game she had learned from the other children in the compound. He looked across the room at Toria, who was standing in the doorway to the kitchen watching them, and the look on his face was so open and unguarded that it made her look away for a second. She was beginning to think she loved him. She was beginning to think that this, the careful, deliberate, slow reconstruction of a life after grief and loss, was actually, incredibly, working. And then the world shifted again, because that is what the world does when you have started to trust it. It happened on a Sunday afternoon in December. Nelson had been wanting Toria to meet his sister Ricky for weeks. He spoke about Ricky with the kind of affectionate exasperation reserved for siblings who know you too well. He said Ricky was smart and outspoken and completely incapable of keeping her opinions to herself, and that Toria would like her. He said Ricky had been asking to meet her. He had invited both of them to his house in GRA Phase 2, a short drive from Toria's flat, for a Sunday afternoon gathering. Toria had been a little nervous. Meeting the sister was a step. She had dressed carefully, put Yo-Yo in a clean yellow dress, and driven the short distance to Nelson's place with the window down, because December in Port Harcourt still carried the warm, slightly dusty smell that she had grown up with. The house was large and well kept, set back from the road behind a compound wall. There were a few cars parked inside. Nelson met them at the gate, took Yo-Yo's hand, and led them through to the back terrace, where a small group of family and friends were gathered around a table loaded with food. Ricky was standing near the drinks table when they came through the back door. She was a tall woman, lighter skinned than Nelson, in her late 30s, with his same steady eyes and an energy that was sharper and quicker. She turned when she heard the back door open, and her face was already arranged in the bright, curious expression of someone ready to meet someone important. And then she saw Toria. The expression collapsed. It did not change gradually, the way surprise usually works. It simply fell off her face in one moment, like a picture falling from a wall. Ricky stood very still, her glass in her hand, staring at Toria with something that was not quite recognition, and not quite anything else either. Something between recognition and a memory that had never fully healed. Toria had gone still too, because she knew that face. Ricky Peters, who used to be Ricky Okafor before she married and took her husband's name and then gave it back after the divorce. Ricky, who had grown up on the same street in Agba as a boy named Daley Peters. Ricky, who had been Daley's girlfriend for 2 years before Toria had met him. Ricky, who had been Toria's closest friend at university in their second and third year, before life had scattered them, and before a man had come between a friendship in the complicated, irreversible way that sometimes happens between women who love the same person. Toria had met Daley at a party that Ricky had brought her to. She had not known then, not fully. By the time she understood that Ricky had deeper feelings for Daley than she let on, things had already moved too far. Ricky had pulled away. The friendship had gone cold. There had been no dramatic fight, no confrontation, just a slow withdrawal, like a tide going out. And then graduation, and life, and years, and then Daley's illness, and then nothing. Toria had not seen Ricky Okafor in over 10 years. And Ricky's brother was the man Toria had been falling in love with. Nelson looked between the two women. He saw immediately that something was wrong, the way attentive people always see immediately when the energy in a room changes. He said Ricky's name gently, asked if she was all right. Ricky put her glass down on the table beside her. She looked at her brother. Her voice was very controlled when she spoke. She said, "Nelson, can I talk to you inside?" What happened in that house in the next hour was the kind of thing that nobody who was there would forget quickly. Ricky told Nelson in the kitchen, with the door closed, and Toria sitting on the terrace outside, pretending to help Yo-Yo with some food, what the history was. She was not shouting. That was the strange part. She was very quiet. But she told him about Daley. She told him about how she had loved Daley, how she had believed they were building toward a life together, and then how Toria had come into the picture. She told him that she did not entirely blame Toria. That was the right thing to say, and she had spent years rehearsing saying it. But she told him that this specific situation, his sister, this woman, was too much to ask of her. She told him that Yo-Yo was Daley's daughter, that the little girl in the yellow dress eating jollof rice on his terrace was the child of the man who had broken her heart at 30 years old. Nelson came back outside and sat beside Toria. He did not say anything for a moment, just sat there, watching Yo-Yo eat. Then he asked Toria, quietly, if she knew who Ricky was. Toria said yes. She said she had recognized Ricky the moment she walked in. She said she had not known, until that afternoon, that Nelson and Ricky were related. She said she was sorry. She did not say it the way people say sorry when they are performing an apology. She said it with the weight of someone who understood exactly what her presence had just cost someone else. Nelson was quiet for a long time. Then he said he needed to think. 3 days later, Toria received a letter from Goldfield's HR department. It was formal, professional. It cited a restructuring of the organizational development department. It was signed by the HR manager and had no personal note attached to it. But Toria knew what it was. She knew who had made this happen. She packed her desk that afternoon with the same straight back and quiet dignity she brought to everything. She said goodbye to Rose at reception. She nodded to the senior consultants who looked uncomfortable and did not quite meet her eyes. She did not cry. She walked out of the Goldfield building on Abba Road with her one box and her handbag, and she stood on the pavement for a moment in the warm December afternoon, with the traffic noise and the smell of dust and diesel, and she breathed. Then she called the woman who sold rice and beans near the building entrance, bought 2 portions, walked to her car, and drove home to GRA Phase 2 to feed her daughter. That was Toria Amaichi. She grieved later. She let herself fall apart later, in the bathroom with the door locked and the tap running, so Yo-Yo would not hear. But she did not fall apart in public. Not for Goldfield. Not for anyone. Nelson did not call. She did not call him, either. What none of them knew was that Ricky was unraveling in her own way. She had gotten what she wanted, or what she thought she wanted. Toria was gone. Nelson was back in her life without the complication. But the victory felt nothing like she had imagined it would. She had replayed the scene in the kitchen, Nelson's face going carefully still as she spoke, the way he had not argued with her, had not defended Toria loudly, but had also not agreed with her. Not really. He had just gone quiet. And Ricky knew her brother well enough to know that his quiet was not agreement. She had been carrying the wound of Daly for 11 years. Daly, who had chosen someone else. Daly, who had married someone else and had a daughter, and then died and left behind a widow and child who had somehow, impossibly, found their way directly into her brother's life. It was the kind of thing that felt designed by a cruel universe specifically to keep hurting her. And yet, the image of Toria on that terrace, straight-backed, composed, asking for nothing, with a 6-year-old in a yellow dress at her side. The image had been sitting in Ricky's chest like a stone for weeks. In January, 2 weeks after Toria had been let go from Goldfield, Ricky did something that she would later describe as the worst decision she had made in a decade. She was having lunch at a restaurant off Olu Obasanjo Road with a friend, a woman named Precious Ibe, who was charming and polished and had a way of making you feel like she was on your side in whatever situation you were currently navigating. Ricky, who was not usually the type to discuss her personal business with friends, found herself telling Precious about the whole situation. Daly, Toria, Nelson, the job, all of it. Precious had listened with wide, sympathetic eyes and said all the right things. She had said that Ricky had done nothing wrong. She had said that of course a person should protect their family. She had said that she would have done the same thing. Then Precious had said, and this was the part that Ricky would replay over and over later with a grinding feeling of shame, that she knew a way to help Toria that would not require Ricky to swallow her pride or reopen old wounds. She said she had contacts in the consulting world. She said she could introduce Toria to some people, help her find work, help her get back on her feet. All without Ricky having to be directly involved. She said she would handle it quietly, as a favor, because that was the kind of person she was. Ricky had felt a wave of relief, so large and immediate that she should have been suspicious of it. She gave Precious Toria's contact information. She told her where Toria lived. Precious reached out to Toria. She introduced herself as a business consultant and mutual acquaintance. She was warm and professional on the phone. She said she had heard about Toria's work at Goldfield and wanted to explore a possible collaboration on a contract. She said she needed a business development specialist to help her manage a short-term government advisory contract and was prepared to pay well for the right person. Toria was desperate enough to listen. Desperate but not stupid. She asked questions. Precious had answers for all of them. She sent a formal email with details that looked legitimate. She suggested they meet at a coffee shop near Transamati to discuss the specifics. They met. Precious was exactly as charming in person. She talked about the contract, about the scope of work, about the pay structure. Then she said there was one issue. The contract required the subconsultant to demonstrate liquid capital availability of 1 million naira as a performance guarantee, just a formality. It would be returned within 14 days once the contracting agency processed the paperwork. Toria said she did not have 1 million naira. Precious said that was fine. Many people in this situation used a joint account arrangement. Precious would help structure it. She said Toria should withdraw whatever savings she had, and Precious would top up the rest temporarily, and they would combine it in a holding account for the 14 days. Toria thought about it for 2 days. She called the government agency number that Precious had provided. It rang through to a recorded message that sounded official. She checked the email again. Everything looked consistent. She was tired and scared, and the prospect of a legitimate consulting income was so bright against the darkness of the past months that it made her judgment soft in ways that her normal self would never have allowed. She withdrew 480,000 naira, every naira she had saved from her salary during her months at Goldfield. She transferred it to the joint account Precious had set up. Precious said she would add the remaining amount by end of day. She said they would sign the formal agreement in the morning. Precious did not answer her phone in the morning. She did not answer the next morning either. By the third morning, Toria understood what had happened. The account was empty. The government agency number was now dead. The email address was returning failed delivery notices. And Precious eBay, charming and sympathetic and perfectly positioned to exploit a grieving widow's desperate hope, was gone. 480,000 naira. Gone. Toria sat in her kitchen in GRA Phase 2 at 7 in the morning and stared at the table. Yo-Yo was still asleep. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, the compound was starting to wake up. The sounds of mourning, a generator somewhere, a woman calling her child, a gate opening. Toria thought about what she had left. The apartment rent was paid through the end of March. That was 6 weeks. She had 6 weeks. A bag of gari in the cupboard, some ground nuts, 2 eggs, half a bottle of groundnut oil. She thought about Daly. She thought about how he used to say that the thing about rock bottom was that it was solid. You could push off from it. She thought that was a very Daly kind of thing to say, practical and optimistic at the same time. She thought that if he were here, he would have said it exactly like that, with that small, sideways smile. She breathed out slowly. Then she stood up and made breakfast for Yo-Yo.
Eat some more. Okay.
When Ricky found out what Precious had done, it felt like falling through the floor. She had called Precious to check how things were going with Toria, expecting to hear that the contract had come through, that Toria was back on her feet, that everything had sorted itself out cleanly. Instead, Precious did not answer. Ricky called 4 more times over 2 days. Nothing. Then she got a message from a mutual contact saying that Precious had been running a variation of this same scheme on multiple people and had quietly relocated from Port Harcourt. Ricky sat in her car outside her office near Olu Obasanjo Road and pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. She had done this. She had given Precious access to Toria. She had handed a vulnerable woman's contact information to a person she had not properly vetted because it was convenient, because it let her feel like she had done something decent without actually having to confront the indecency of what she had done at Goldfield. She had used a stranger to launder her own guilt, and the stranger had turned out to be a predator. And somewhere in a flat in GRA Phase 2, a woman who had never, when everything was examined clearly, actually done anything malicious to Ricky, was sitting with her daughter and whatever was left after a fraudster had cleaned her out. Ricky drove to GRA Phase 2. She was not sure what she expected. She half expected Toria not to answer the door. She expected whatever the opposite of a warm welcome looked like. She sat in the car outside the compound for 15 minutes. Then she went in. Toria answered the door in a wrapper and house slippers. She looked at Ricky. Ricky looked at her. Neither of them said anything for a full 5 seconds. Then Toria stepped back from the door. Ricky came inside. The flat was sparse but clean, the kind of clean that comes from having very few things and taking good care of each one, where every surface had a purpose and nothing was out of place because there was nothing spare to be out of place. It had the specific, dignified quality of a home that belonged to someone who refused to let circumstances make her less than herself. Yo-Yo was sitting at the small dining table. In front of her was a plastic plate with a small mound of gari and a cup of water for soaking it. No soup, no stew, no groundnut oil, no sugar, no milk, just gari and water. The child was stirring it with a spoon in the methodical way children stir things when they are hungry and waiting for the signal. She looked up when Ricky came in, assessed this new adult with those direct eyes, and looked back at her plate. Ricky stood in the doorway to the dining area and looked at that plate for a long moment. She thought about her own kitchen, which had a full fridge and a gas cooker that worked, and a freezer stocked with things bought in bulk because she had the money and the space. She thought about the restaurant on Olu Obasanjo Road, where she had sat across from Precious and talked freely about a woman's misfortune, like it was a problem to be managed from a comfortable distance. Something broke open in her chest. Not gently. The kind of breaking that happens when something has been sealed under pressure for a very long time, for years even, and one small image, one child with a plate of gari, releases it all at once. She turned and looked at Toria, who was watching her from the kitchen doorway with those steady, waiting eyes that did not ask for anything and had long ago stopped expecting anything from people who had already given their worst. And Ricky, who had not cried in front of another person since her divorce, felt her throat close completely. She said, "Toria, I am sorry." Not, "I heard what happened to you." Not, "I had no idea she would do that." She said she was sorry. Plainly. Without the qualifying clauses and softening language that people use when they want to apologize, without fully committing to it. She said she was sorry for Precious, for putting that woman in Toria's path. She said she was sorry for the job at Goldfield, for going to Nelson and using her position as his sister to end something that Toria had earned and built honestly. She said she was sorry for 10 years ago, for the way she had carried that old hurt, like it gave her a permanent right to collect interest from Toria's life. She said she was sorry for the plate of gari in front of Yo-Yo, because that was her to own, whether she wanted to or not. She said all of this standing in the small hallway of the flat, without excuses, and without the performance of tears that would make it about her feelings, rather than Toria's situation. Toria listened. When Ricky finished, the flat was very quiet, except for the sound of Yo-Yo stirring her gari. Toria looked at her daughter for a moment. Then she looked at Ricky and said, quietly, "Come and sit down." They sat at the table. There was a long silence. Yo-Yo ate her gari with the focused, private concentration of a child who understands she is in the middle of an adult moment and is being polite by pretending otherwise. Ricky reached into her handbag and took out her phone and made a transfer without turning it into a discussion or a negotiation or a moment to establish the terms of her generosity. She just did it and put her phone face down on the table. Toria looked at the notification that came to her own phone. She started to object. Ricky shook her head once and said, "Please, just this once. Just let her." Toria looked at her. Something in Ricky's face was different from the woman she had seen in Nelson's compound in December. The defensive sharpness was gone, or at least it was not the whole expression. What was there instead was something rawer and quieter. Something that looked like a woman who had spent weeks inside a feeling she did not enjoy. Toria said, "Thank you." Then Ricky called her brother.
Hello? Oh,
She called
hi.
Nelson
Is everything
and told
okay?
him what had happened.
What? Oh
About
no,
Precious.
Are you serious? What is
About
it?
the money. About finding Yo-Yo with Gary and water for lunch. She told him she had been wrong. She did not spell out in what specific way or to what degree she had been wrong. She left those specific measurements for a conversation that would happen later. But she
Yes, I'm
said it
listening.
plainly enough that
Understood. What are the
Nelson,
next steps?
sitting in his office
Good.
on Abba
I'll
Road,
handle it.
understood exactly what his sister was telling him. He said he would come by after work. The conversation that Nelson and Toria had that evening, after Yo-Yo had been put to bed and Ricky had gone home, was not a dramatic one. Neither of them was the dramatic type. They sat in the small sitting room, the ceiling
worried
fan
about
moving
us.
slowly overhead,
We'll get through it.
and they
How can you be
talked.
so sure?
I just
They
know.
talked about everything that had happened since December. The job, the money, the silence between them. What Ricky had told him, what Ricky had told Toria, what they each had felt during the weeks of not speaking. Nelson said he was sorry for how Goldfield had handled it. He said it should not have happened that way. He said there was a version of events where he had handled things better, and he owned that clearly. Toria said she understood that he had been trying to navigate a situation that was complicated in ways he had not created. She said she was not angry at him. She said what she was tired. Tired of surviving. Tired of every time she found solid ground, it shifted again. Tired of being strong in the way women in her situation were expected to be strong, which was silently and without complaint.
I'm worried
He
about
listened.
us.
Then he said,
We'll get through it.
"I
How
know."
can you be so sure?
He said something else too. He said that these weeks without her had shown him with complete clarity what he wanted, which was her. Not as someone to rescue or to provide for or to carry. As a partner. As the person in the room he was most interested in talking to. As the mother of a little girl who had somehow, in the span of a few months, become a very important small person in his world. He said he was not going to pretend that the road was going to be perfectly smooth from here, but he was asking if she wanted to walk it with him. She looked at him for a long time. She thought about the thin wrapper on the marble lobby floor. She thought about the hotel breakfast and Yo-Yo watching cartoons. She thought about the contract she had signed with a full heart and framed degree still in her memories. She thought about the Friday evening on Peter O'Deely Road and the smell of grilled fish and the way Nelson had been turning his car key over in his pocket when he asked her to dinner. She thought about Daly and how he would have had a very specific and probably slightly embarrassing opinion about all of this, and how she could hear his voice so clearly saying it that it made her smile for a second in the middle of everything. She told Nelson yes. The next month was about rebuilding. Nelson brought
Good
Toria
morning.
back to
I have a package
Goldfield,
for Goldfield.
not as a
Of
cleaner,
course, thank you.
not as a
I'll
junior
take that for you.
consultant,
Thank you.
but in a reinstated role with a formal note in her file clarifying that her previous departure had been a procedural matter unrelated to her performance. The HR manager, who had clearly been uncomfortable with the whole situation from the start, processed the reinstatement quickly and without fuss. The organizational development practice that Toria had been building began again. But this time, she came back with the full weight of what she had learned about the company, about its gaps, about where the real leverage points were for change. She had used the weeks out of the office to write a comprehensive internal review, partly to keep her mind occupied, partly because she was incapable of leaving a problem unexamined. She brought that document back with her. The senior partners, -1, read it. They called it one of the most thorough internal assessments the company had produced in its recent history. The -1, the senior partner who had not read it, and in fact had refused to receive it because he did not accept that a junior consultant should be producing assessments that should by rights be coming from senior management, was Gozi. Gozi had been increasingly difficult in the months since Toraya's reinstatement. He was not subtle about his disdain. He made comments in meetings about the appropriate scope of junior staff. He questioned resource allocation decisions that had been approved by Nelson. He had twice attempted to reassign Toraya's work to people who reported directly to him, without authorization. He had, in one particularly unpleasant boardroom meeting, made a comment about soft sciences and whether sociology could really be considered a serious qualification for corporate consulting, directed at the far end of the table where Toraya was taking notes, loudly enough that the entire room heard it. Nobody laughed. The room went very quiet. Nelson had looked at Gozi with the specific kind of stillness that people who know him understood immediately. He had said, in a calm, even voice, that he thought they should table the current agenda item and move on, and that he would have a separate conversation with Gozi about professional conduct. What happened next had been coming for a while. The annual company gathering was held in late February, a tradition at Goldfield that combined a review of the previous year's performance with announcements about structure and direction for the year ahead. It was held in the main conference hall on the 3rd floor, all 40 staff members plus senior management. There was food and drinks after. It was, in most years, a pleasant and morale-building event. This year, the announcements portion was more significant than usual. Nelson opened with the previous year's performance data, which was strong. Revenue was up. Client retention was excellent. They had won 3 major new contracts, including the government infrastructure advisory that had kept Nelson in the office until 10 at night back in October. He moved through the highlights with his usual composure. Then he announced a structural reorganization. The commercial director role, he said, was being restructured. The company had grown to the point where the original partnership model was no longer serving its operational needs. He outlined the new structure clearly and professionally. The commercial director position was being folded into a newly created client strategy division, headed by a recently hired director who had been quietly brought on board over the past 6 weeks. The previous commercial director, Gozi Peterside, would move into a senior advisory role, consultancy basis, non-executive. Gozi sat at his usual seat at the management table. He did not move. His expression was controlled, but his jaw was tight in the way of a man making a significant effort to keep his face still. Nelson acknowledged Gozi's contributions to building the company, did so genuinely, and with the specificity that made clear he meant it, and expressed his hope that the new advisory arrangement would allow Gozi's experience to continue benefiting Goldfield's clients. The room was very quiet. Then Nelson said there was one more announcement. He said that over the past 6 months, the company had been piloting an expanded organizational development and human capital practice. He said the results had exceeded expectations in every measurable dimension. He said that the practice had produced work that had directly contributed to 3 successful client proposals and had generated more internal clarity about the company's own processes than any previous internal review effort. He said the company would be formalizing that practice as a full division, effective immediately. He said the division would be led by a person whose understanding of organizational dynamics, people, and human systems was, in his considered assessment, among the most impressive he had encountered in 20 years of building businesses. He said her name was Toria Amechi. He said she was being appointed managing director of the Organizational Development and Human Capital Division, with a seat at the senior management table. The room erupted, not in a chaotic way. In the way rooms erupt when people have been watching something build toward a conclusion, and the conclusion arrives, and it is the right one. Rose was clapping loudly. Several of the consultants who had worked closely with Toria were on their feet. Even the HR manager, who was not typically demonstrative, was nodding with genuine approval. Toria sat in the middle of the second row of chairs and felt the sound wash over her like something warm. She thought about the marble floor in the lobby downstairs. She thought about the thin wrapper and Yo-Yo's sleeping face. She thought about the wet mop and Gozi's dismissive voice and the supply closet where she had pressed her hands over her eyes and counted to 3 minutes. She thought about Daly, who had believed in her so completely and consistently that even after he was gone, the belief lived on in her like a second heartbeat. She stood up. She walked to the front of the room. She stood at the podium and looked out at the faces of the people she worked with, people who had become real to her over the months of rebuilding, people who had seen something in her that she had sometimes forgotten to see in herself. She looked at Ricky, who had not originally been on the guest list for this gathering, but had been invited by Nelson at the last minute, sitting near the back of the room with a complicated expression that was not quite guilt and not quite relief, but something that lived between them. She looked at Nelson, who was standing to the side of the podium with his hands clasped in front of him, watching her with an expression she had come to recognize as the one he only let out when he thought no one was watching. She was watching. She spoke simply and without notes. She thanked Nelson for building the kind of company where this kind of appointment was possible. She thanked the senior consultants who had treated her work seriously from the beginning, and the HR manager who had run a fair interview process in those early days, without allowing sentimentality to muddy professionalism. She thanked Rose, who caught her eye at this and immediately looked at the ceiling and blinked several times. She said she looked forward to building something meaningful, work that would actually help the people it was supposed to help, the companies and their staff, and the communities they operated in across Rivers State and beyond. She said she believed that organizations were just people, and that when you invested properly in people and took them seriously, gave them the resources and the respect and the room to grow, everything else followed. Productivity followed. Loyalty followed. Excellence followed. Not because you demanded these things, but because people who are treated with dignity tend to bring their best selves to their work. She said one more thing. She said that she had learned, over the past difficult year, that the thing that separated the people who rebuilt from the people who did not was not talent or intelligence or education, though all of those mattered deeply. It was the willingness to keep going when going made no logical sense. It was the decision, repeated every single morning before you even got out of bed, to believe that tomorrow would be better, even when today gave you no evidence for that belief. It was the decision to frame the degree and hang it on the wall, even when the world told you it meant nothing. It was the decision to tell your daughter every night that tomorrow would be better, so that she would believe it too, so that the belief would travel between you like warmth, and neither of you would go cold. She looked at Yo-Yo, who was sitting in the back row in her best dress, having been brought by Nelson's driver that morning as a surprise, having been told only that Mummy was getting an important award. Yo-Yo was watching her mother with those big, clear eyes, and the expression on her face was one of simple, uncomplicated pride. The kind of pride that does not need to understand exactly what is being celebrated to know that the right person is being celebrated. Toria looked at her daughter and smiled. After the gathering, after the food and the congratulations and the careful handshake that Gozi offered, which she received graciously because she was who she was after all of it. When the hall had mostly cleared and the catering staff were beginning to fold up tables at the edges of the room, Nelson found her by the window that looked out over Abba Road.
The view is
Port Harcourt
incredible.
was doing what it always
very
did in the late
Look
afternoon,
at that building.
moving
I see
and
it.
humming and carrying on with the business of itself. The traffic on Abba Road, the sound of a generator somewhere below, the orange dust of the Harmattan haze softening the edges of the skyline, the Niger Delta light, thick and gold and specific to this place and no other place on earth. He stood beside her, not in front, not behind, beside. The way people stand when they are not performing proximity but simply existing in it. She said, "I need to update my CV." He said, "Managing Director, Organizational Development and Human Capital Division, Goldfield Partners Limited." She said, "Sounds right." He said, "It is right." She looked at him. He looked at her. Yo-Yo appeared at Toria's other side, slid her hand into her mother's hand, and leaned against her arm the way children lean against the people they know will not move. The three of them stood by the window as the afternoon light shifted over Abba Road. And that is where this story ends. Not with a dramatic gesture, or a speech, or a final twist. With a woman standing at a window in the city where she was born, with her daughter's hand in hers, and a good man standing beside her. With the weight of everything she had survived settling into something that was not a wound anymore, but a foundation. With the knowledge, solid and clear, that she had not been saved by anyone. She had saved herself. She had gotten up from the marble floor one morning at a time, and she had done the work and taken the pain and kept the door open on the days when every instinct told her to close it. Daly had always said that rock bottom was solid. He was right about that, the way he was right about most things. He had not been a man of grand statements or complicated philosophy. He had been a man who understood simple truths with great clarity and lived by them daily, which was perhaps why he had been given that name, why the name had fitted him so perfectly. Daily, present, consistent,
Wow, it's so big.
It
warm.
is, isn't it?
A whole
The kind of
world out
man
there.
whose absence leaves a shape in a room that nothing else quite fills. But Toria had learned these months that love was not a finite resource that emptied when the person who first filled it was gone. It was something that grew back, carefully, slowly, in the right conditions, with the right person. It grew back. Not the same as before, different, deeper in some ways, because it was chosen again after knowing loss, after knowing what it cost to open yourself and what it cost not to. Toria Amaichi had hit the bottom and pushed off from it with both feet. She had come all the way up here, to this window, to this room, to this life. And it was hers. Every single part of it was hers. Tomorrow, as she had always truly believed and always known it would be, was better.
Wow, it's so big.
It is, isn't it?
A whole world out there.
I love this.